Sin is one of those complicated and unpleasant terms, so we need to start by defining the word. The word, sin, is translated from a Greek word that is used to score in archery competition. It is the word that describes the distance between a bullseye and where the arrow actually hits. In other words, sin is missing the mark. Another way of looking at sin is to say that sin is falling short. Imagine you are trying to get across a ravine and there is no bridge. So, you run and jump. What happens if you fall short? Oh, ouch. This illustration is also thought-provoking because it reminds us that there are natural and inevitable consequences when we sin. One final definition, and this is the brainy one from the Westminster Shorter Catechism: sin is any want of conformity unto or transgression of the will of God. So let's put all this together. Somewhere out there, there is a target, a standard, or a principle, and that is the measure of right and wrong. When we do something that breaks that standard, we have sinned. We have fallen short. We have missed the mark. Any time that we fail to do what is right, or do something that is wrong, that is sin. But it is more complicated and challenging than that. Sin isn't just about what you do, it is also a heart issue, about attitudes and motivations. Imagine that you hate your next-door neighbor, or your teacher, or your ex-boyfriend, or an astronaut, or, well, you can fill in the blank. If you hate anyone, you haven't really done anything, but you have an attitude deep in your heart that is sinful. This is challenging because now we do realize that sin includes not only actions, but also our attitudes. Anytime we think, or say, or do anything against the standard, we have sinned. But now let's consider God. Let's assume for a minute that God is the one who has set the standard, the absolute standard for all people everywhere. If we don't conform to God's standard, or we break His law, we have sinned. And since His standard is absolute perfection in every way, which is something none of us can achieve, we have all sinned. We have all broken His law. So this raises the question, what motivates us to stop sinning? Does knowing the law actually help us to obey the law? Well, sure, sometimes. The law tells us that murder is wrong, so most of us don't murder. But let's watch some people drive down the interstate. Why are they all driving 62 miles per hour in a 55 zone? Because ultimately, people aren't all that motivated to follow the law just because they know the law. Does knowing the speed limit compel us to drive at the speed limit? A little bit. But there are other internal motivations that determine how fast we drive. People really want to go as fast as they can without being caught and punished. In many ways, we don't want to think of ourselves as lawbreakers, but we don't mind being law benders. God, however, doesn't recognize this subtle difference. Since His law is perfection, when you bend the law, you have broken the law. And remember how far this goes. He is not only watching what you say and do, but He knows the inner struggles of your heart, the things you think about, even when you are alone. So even if you break God's law in secret, you find there are no secrets from God. Since it is all about relationship, let's take a look at this issue of sin from a different perspective. Imagine this scenario. What happens when you get in a fight with your brother, or mother, or your best friend? Generally, arguments are nothing more than expressions of selfishness at high volume. We want something, and someone else gets in the way, so we fight. But after the argument, what happens? Whether you get your way or not, you have damaged your relationship with the other person. You are hurt, they are hurt, damaged relationship. If you love that person, you should realize that you have hurt someone who is precious, and the only way to fix the problem is to work things out. Talk together, forgive each other, restore and strengthen the relationship. Now look at your relationship with God. When you sin against Him, it is the same thing, an expression of your selfishness and wanting to do things your way rather than His way. And what happens to your relationship with Him? When you sin against Him, you are hurting someone who loves you beyond what you can even fathom. You have damaged your relationship with your best friend. So now, if we put the concept of law and relationship together, we realize that when you sin, you are not only breaking the law of God, but you are breaking your relationship with God. As Timothy Keller so astutely puts it, sin isn't just breaking God's law, it is breaking God's heart. So now we have more than one motivation to not sin. It comes down to what we know and who we know. Knowing the standard helps us recognize when we have broken the law, when we have missed the mark. But knowing the infinitely loving lawgiver softens and changes our hearts so we don't want to hurt the God who saved us.